Hello, welcome to the Blessings Podcast, Neal Bakshi. I am so excited to share you with my audience today because you are just a shining light of beauty and positive energy and all that is possible for us here. Let me just give a brief introduction to who you are, and then I would love for you to tell the audience anything they need to know about you and what you're up to right now. You are a spiritual coach, right? You use Reiki energy in healing. I know you do work with people one on one, you do work with people in groups, you do energy readings, and you are a sort of spiritual entrepreneur, really, right?
Yep.
Okay. And your story is really interesting because, and we'll get to that, but you started out in a completely different field. So, is there anything else we need to know just going in?
You hit on a lot of it. One aspect that is a big part of who I am is I love to work with angels and the work of the angelic realm. And so in my own journey, it really wasn't part of my upbringing at all. And it happened after a lot of the circumstances in my life, which we'll get into in my life story. So I don't want to tease too much out yet, but it's been an incredible journey and I'm super grateful to be here and thank you for having me. And where I am right now in my life is a super exciting juncture. I moved out of New York, which is where I lived for 13 years, and I'm about to embark on an incredible journey through Portugal, Ibiza, Spain, and Morocco before coming back to the US and continuing my life as a digital nomad here in the States. So it's been an awesome journey and one that is starting tomorrow going to be even more expansive. So I'm excited to share my lessons and experiences with everyone as a result of this.
Thank you. First of all, I have to say it means so much to me that you're doing this the day before you're leaving on such a big trip. I'm hoping that you get some beautiful energy to take with you along the trip, and our wishes for you for having this amazing trip. And I also want to just say that you are the author of this amazing book,
Yeah,
Banking on Angels, which I have thoroughly enjoyed and have earmarked all kinds of things and underlined and highlighted all kinds of things, many of which I'll be asking you about here. And so the idea of banking on angels, we'll just say before we dig into the life story, has to do with the fact that you were an investment banker before you started this more spiritual path. So just give us a little bit about that, and then we'll find out how you came to take that step.
absolutely. So my life dream from the age of 12 years old was to be an investment banker. It was actually to own my own investment banking firm called Bakshi Bucks. And over years of life, through high school, through college, and thereafter, I manifested basically my dream life. I worked in investment banking on Wall Street for 8 years. Worked tirelessly and effortlessly and ultimately climbed the ranks to vice president at Goldman Sachs. I was on our leverage finance and structured finance desks, working on structuring, selling, and closing and allocating billions of dollars of high yield bonds, leverage loans, various structured products. And over my time there, I completed well over $100 billion worth of transactions. And so it's been a really amazing journey to go from investment banking, something I wanted to do my entire life, and seeing how the universe brought me into being a spiritual life coach, energy healer, angel medium, best-selling author. It's crazy to think we have these plans for what we want our lives to turn out. And life has a fascinating way of saying, you did a great job here. Now it's time for you to go on another journey and try something else out. And so it's been an awesome transformation, all of which I'm very grateful for. But yeah, we totally get into that.
Oh my gosh, I love it so much. All right, so let's talk about where you were born and get to know a little bit about who you were as a very small child.
Sure. So I was born just outside of Princeton, New Jersey. I was actually born in Philadelphia. My parents love the hospital systems in Philadelphia, which is why I was born there. But I grew up right outside of Princeton and had a nice upbringing with my family. Both of my parents worked. My dad was a merchant marine engineer, and my mom worked in healthcare finance. And my dad really traveled a lot for work. So he was a chief engineer on a ship for a number of years. My parents
Mm.
actually sailed the world for nearly 7 years together while he was a chief engineer on ship. They were in all of these crazy countries during crazy times. They have such amazing stories. And ultimately, my dad, pretty far away. So he worked in Richmond, Virginia for a while. He worked always like pretty far away from the home. And so he never lived at home really Monday through Friday. And so it was
Mm.
my mom and I who had a very close relationship. My sister was 5 years older. And when you're that young of a kid, you don't really overlap even in schools in elementary or middle or high school. Friend groups are totally different, energies are totally different. We weren't very close growing up, super close to my mom. We would occasionally go down to visit my dad in Richmond, or he would come back on the weekends from work. So that's the childhood experience I went through. And things, interestingly, from I'd say probably end of elementary school, middle school on, I started struggling with academics. And so I wasn't the brightest kid in my grade by any means. I had a number of tutors. I went to these Sylvan Learning Center after school to get tutoring, private tutors as well, just to stay on top of math and writing and reading. My sister was the really smart one. She always went to better school above me in terms of even high school and college.
Hmm.
Um, and then I also started to struggle with weight gain. I was obese as a kid, and that really played a big role in my self-confidence growing up as well. So it wasn't necessarily an easy or seamless upbringing by any means. There were a number of these various different factors that played a role in developing my personality in a sense and coming into understanding who I was.
Interesting. So before you got into middle school and some of these things started to come into your life, do you remember a shift or how did you feel when you were really little up until that point?
I was a terrible kid growing up. I
Really?
was I was a
Okay.
terrible kid
Tell
growing up. I was
tell us
like,
a story. Give us a
oh,
story.
I would throw temper tantrums. I would be angry and upset. The biggest reason I put on so much weight is because my mom would like make amazing food and all this stuff, and we'd have all this for dinner, and I'd be like, "I want real food. I want real food." And I was like, What is real food? What do you want?" And I would like eat like corn dogs and Burger King and all
Okay.
of the junk fast food and be like angry when I didn't get it. And I would throw temper tantrums and just like, be facetious and be like snarky. And like my parents just gave me love. And my mom was a absolute saint. Even my friends in high school were like, "Neil, your mom's a saint." And I was definitely not the easiest kid to raise. And even my mom growing up, b by the time I got into college, she was like my greatest accomplishment, and she had, like, career accolades. She ended up going from being in, like, a visiting nurse in the Visiting Nurses Association to ending up being a CFO of a hospital for a number of years and really seeing her rise as a career through, even difficult times of not having a job, and my parents came to the US from India with $7 in their pocket, and
Whoa.
yeah, that is a situation I will never forget and has really been an influence on how I see money a lot too, and healing money wounds over the past couple of years has been topical for me because every narrative has been working super hard, working tirelessly. You need to work hard to get ahead, and you need to grind yourself, and my parents just they worked and worked, and my mom was like, even after all that, she's my greatest accomplishment in life was raising you. She would say
So
that. It was
that
amazing.
is so interesting. I just knowing what little I do know of you, we've been friends for a little while. I would never have thought that you were that type of a child. So do you remember any are there any stories from when you were really young that you, for example, your earliest memory? What is it that you could remember like one of the first things you remember?
Wow. The only reason I probably remember this is because there's a picture of it, but it's a picture of me during Halloween. I don't even know how old I am. I wanna say probably like 5 or 4, and I'm dressed as Dracula, and it's like I am pouting, and I have my arms crossed, and I'm just, like, sulking. My mom used to call me Oscar the Grouch because I would just have just, like, some of these, like, really just, like, angry, like, grouchy, not, like, compassionate or loving or, like, any of that, and it's amazing to even think about that and just, like, how much I've changed because,
Yeah.
like, I would not go getting dressed up or going out, and I would do it out of obligation, and my parents would be like, "Oh, like, it's Halloween, let's go trick or treating," and I would be sulking and, like, in my Dracula costume. It's amazing. So those are some of the early memories I try to not remember a bunch of them, or maybe I, as I've grown up, have removed those memories from my life, but I remember how I was. So it's interesting.
That is interesting. What do you think that was all about? Why were you so angry?
I actually have thought about that a lot, interestingly, as I've grown and evolved on my own path and been like, why was I such a angsty, terrible, bratty, obnoxious kid? And I think I I never want to use this as a scapegoat, but part of me thinks there was some aspect of past life karma where I
Mhm.
was carrying forward into this life. And that instance of coming back into and also coming back into the world, part of me for a while, even after I went through this whole spiritual awakening glow up, was why am I back here? Like, why am I back here? And like, didn't want to be back here. But I then realized I chose to come back here for a
Yeah.
reason. And I think part of it was like a mix of what past karma I was carrying with me from other previous difficult life situations and lives I lived, and simultaneously being angry that I was back here. And my mom would always say to me growing up, she's like, and sh I remember this all the time, and I even talk about it with my sister. She would always say, "You must have done something right to be born into this family." And she would say that all the time, and it's wild that I still think about that. I'm like, "I really must have done something right to be born into this family." I'm so grateful for everything that they've done for me.
Okay, that's very interesting. Have you ever gone into your past life exploration to see where some of this karma might have been coming from?
So, I have gotten my Akashic records read once, and that happened in a very synchronistic manner. How that came about, the person I was introduced to, and how it happened very suddenly. I have never done a past life regression. The spiritual path I was raised on is called Self Realization Fellowship. It was founded by an Indian yogi who came to the US in 1920 to basically spread spirituality and meditation in the West. His name is Paramahansa Yogananda. And he talks about in his teachings about how focusing too much on past lives actually takes us out of this life and prevents us from doing our best in this life and in this life situation and what is here for us. And it often can lead to people ruminating on the past. And while I do think that there is definite benefit to understanding some of these instances of how these things came about, I don't want to be overly focused on past instances because I truly believe the only moment we have is this present moment.
Mhm.
So allowing myself to be fully present here now and do the best I could possibly can in this moment will allow me to get to where I need to get to in along my life path. So I haven't really dove into that too much. Is there a part of me that wants to? Yeah, totally. Is there a part of me that thinks I might explore some of that down the line? Probably. I am just letting things line up as they may right now, and I'm not
Mhm.
chasing after something that isn't coming to me in a state of flow.
Gotcha. I think that's a great way of looking at it. And I've explored that same concept of like, how can we take a look at the past but not allow it to be stuck there? And I think that the answer is that you're looking at the past from the present, from who you are now. So in that context, I think it feels okay as long as you understand how to look at things and then not be ruminating on them. So
Yeah.
let's go back to where we left off with your middle school years. I'm really curious about that because I'm wondering how that affected your life at that time. So your academics were not really where you wanted them to be, and you were started gaining some weight. How did that play out in your life?
Yeah, so, even going a bit further back, so I failed kindergarten. My I
Really?
failed kindergarten, and I received D's in 4th grade. I was struggled. The thing is
Oh.
I tried. It's not like I wasn't trying. I was actually trying a bunch. It just things didn't necessarily click for me. And then in middle school, started to gain weight because of this angstiness, and my mom was working a ton. My dad was obviously working away from the
Mhm.
house, and I would be like, "I want fast food," and I would drink like
Mm.
3 sodas a day. It was so gross now that I think about it, so unhealthy,
Wow.
and I was gaining all this weight, and it was plummeting my self-confidence, and my grades were not really improving at all, and I was like, I guess, like Bs, B minuses, and that was a turning point. And that's also an interesting coming of age time too.
Mhm.
You start to have crushes, and then I was like getting rejected by all the people that I had crushes on. And then it started to like really take a hit on my self-confidence and really snowball all these things. And at the end of middle school, I ultimately applied to private school for high school. My sister went to a really great private school in New Jersey called Lawrenceville School. That's why she
Mhm.
always went to really uh, upper tier stuff. And then I applied to a school, Princeton Day School, and then I got accepted. And that is when I would say things really started to turn in a way, positive way, but also in a self discovery way, because I still wasn't feeling really confident or embodied within myself. And high school was a very interesting time. And we can get into that in the
Yeah.
next chapter. But middle school was a that was where my interest in investment banking started. I would go to these family gatherings for Christmas and everything where I would see these close family friends, Indian uncles, be high flying MDs at JP Morgan, hedge fund managers, VC investors, all this cool stuff. And like they had amazing houses and cars and the like, top shelf everything. And I was like, wow, like I want this. So then we were asked to write a paper and create business cards in seventh grade, I believe it was. I was 12 years old, about what it was that we wanted to be when we grew up. And I saw my mom also work in healthcare finance. And I was like, I want the finance part of that because you make a lot of money. And
Yeah.
so I wrote my paper about becoming an investment banker and owning my firm Bakshi Bucks. And that's when all of this stuff really started to take hold in terms of my interest in finance and the financial world and all of that stock market, everything.
And what about socially in middle school? Did you have any bullies? Any difficult times?
Wow, great question. That actually started in elementary school, believe it or not.
Mm,
I
okay.
was bullied for my race in elementary school, being an Indian American, and I was also definitely bullied by people in middle school for my weight for
Mm,
sure and my appearance. And it's interesting because even now that I look back on it, in middle school, we're not really even aware. And so even like friends in like our friend groups would tease, right? And so we're not necessarily even, oh, like these people are my friends. It's just, it's teasing. But now that I look back on it with the lens that I have now of coaching and more conscious awareness of self awareness, even those aspects of just like teasing from friends have really profound impacts in
mhm.
terms of our own sense of self-worth and who we believe we are and our belief pictures of who we are in the eyes of others. So, yes, definitely was. It was definitely weight was a huge thing for me. And that's why I never really felt confident in my body for a very long time.
Wow. I'm sorry you had to go through that. But I'm sure that it's taught you some lessons. What do you think you gained from that going into the high school situation where you were able to maybe reinvent some of that?
Yeah. So yeah, high school was a bit of a fresh start. It was
Mhm.
interesting though, because I went to this private school, which was we had 88 kids in our graduating class. So it wasn't a big school at all. And it's pretty small. There was still definitely a little sense of bullying a little bit from some of the older people in the older grades in my freshman, sophomore years. And I think there was also a level of my own self in terms of people pleasing or wanting to be liked by these people in this new environment. And
Yeah.
there's so many lessons I learned throughout that time, a lot of which I now look back and say, wow, those were extraordinarily formative years in terms of me trying to fit in, me trying to gain a grasp of who I was. And I think that in trying to fit in so much and trying to feel wanted and accepted, very root chakra and second chakra themes as it relates to tribal belonging and relations with other people. I now find that when that is so externally focused, we actually don't have the time to be focused on going inside to understand who are we. And I actually went through a period of time in sophomore year where I was extremely depressed. I was like, I'm useless here. What am I doing? Like, I'm not liked or accepted. Like, I don't really have a friend group that I totally fit in with. I'm like floating around here. I don't feel totally accepted by people. I remember like first dance, even in high school, freshman year, I like would try to be friends with people and follow them around, and, like, even they would just be like, "No," walk away. I was like, "Wow, okay." And so this feeling of belonging was calling at me, and I was like, "Okay, where do I feel like I belong here?" And I wasn't really being in authentic necessarily to myself in a totally authentic way because I didn't really know who I was. And then in sophomore year, there were definitely times where I was like, I wanted to kill myself. I was like, not like I did. I was like, let's just go into, and I don't really talk about this at all, but there was actually a recent suicide at the school my sister went to in high school just this last year. And I think it's actually an important thing to bring into the forefront and into the limelight because people don't want to talk about this. But in sophomore year, I was like, and I'll go into the detail. It was like I was sitting in Spanish class and I was like, okay, I can go down the hallway into the arts wing. And what if I go into the bathroom and hang myself? What would happen? And it was like, it wasn't just like a once thought. I was like extremely depressed and I was like struggling, but no one knew it. And even years after high school, I told one or two friends from high school, and they're like, wow, what? I had no possible idea. Like, you seemed like you were friends with everyone. Like, it's just very interesting to be like, things on the outside can seem really great for people, especially in those times when growing up in adolescence. But on the inside, you can be going through a lot of internal struggle that you don't feel comfortable to share with anyone. And so, how do we create a safe space for people now in this day and age where people who do feel that don't need to go to those extremes of committing suicide? And so, that period in sophomore year, I was like, okay, went through a really difficult time. I honestly don't know what caused me to not do something that probably like what would like my mom realistically was like, what would
Yeah.
my mom say?
Yeah.
But that was a really difficult time, and I have no doubt that a lot of other high schoolers go through the same thing.
No doubt. What did you need that you weren't getting? What could have changed? What could have helped you?
Such a great question. The first word that really comes to me is love. That's really the first word that comes to me is love, and I think it's love from classmates, from other people, but also from myself,
Mhm.
and I didn't know how to cultivate that self-love or self-confidence or felt like I was, like, not liked by anyone because I would see you'd see all these other people in high school being, like, getting relationships and, like, all of this other stuff, and I think that was a big part of it. It's, "Oh, I'm not worthy of this. I'm not loved by anyone. I don't really deserve to be here because I'm not like someone who's gonna be loved or appreciated or given compassion or kindness, and I think that's all anyone wants is
Yeah.
we wanna be loved here, whether
Yeah.
regardless of who it is, and, yeah, I think that's the biggest thing that I wanted.
Yeah. It's so interesting, I think, that time in development where your maturity level really doesn't allow you to have access to the inner learning that you need to do. And you're in survival mode because, like you talked about, people that you consider even your friends are saying things that maybe aren't healthy or little digs, things that are mean. But what are you going to do? Lose your entire group of friends?
Right?
This is like that whole period from the early teens and into even up till 20-ish or even beyond. You're in that survival mode where you're trying to fit in. And yet, what you really need is to be able to get in touch with your inner self.
You hit it spot on, and even as right when you started talking, I was like, the other thing I wanted to mention is throughout those years, we're always basically pushed and focused by our parents, by our counselors, mentors, teachers, whomever, coaches. Your job here is to focus on academics or sports or extracurriculars, music, arts, whatever it is to get you into the best college, to set you up for this. Everyone is so focused on those externalities. No one takes the time to cultivate an
Yep.
inner sense of self or a
Yep.
dialogue or an understanding of who we are. That's just not taught in school. I was not taught that
No.
throughout any school. I was taught math and economics and home ec and band and football and all of these things, uh, theater production, but nothing ever talks about who are you? How do we
Yeah.
understand who we are? Self reflection. How do we understand
Yeah.
going within? Even
Yep.
things like meditation or breath work, all of these
Yep.
things so powerful. Imagine if that starts at such a young age, changes your entire relationship to
Yeah.
self.
It could change your entire life. So many people don't even come to even know what those things are until they've gotten to a crisis point later on in their adulthood.
Yep.
It's crazy. I know. I'd love to see more work with that. Even when you went to a private school, did you find you got any of that or no?
I didn't. I
So
got
no.
I got development in arts and like they have all of these amazing environments where you can learn photography or
Mhm.
ceramics or wood
Mhm.
shop and awesome athletic fields and cool stuff like that, but there's no aspect of self-awareness in the
Mhm.
curriculum.
No,
There's English class and history and science, but there's no one talks about the actual practicalities of self-awareness on how to be you, how to understand who you are.
because when you interact with all those external things, you're bringing yourself with you. And if you don't even know who you are, you try to create a piece of art or learn a piece of history, it's harder.
Totally.
It would be so much easier if there were an integration.
And I
So,
think it's great to have those creative outlets, sports and arts, because it is a way to creatively show who you are. But you're right. If you aren't able to even a little bit more consciously know that, then how do you integrate that? And
yeah.
integration is really the key.
Yeah, definitely. So how did high school go then?
So after that, high school went pretty well. I have a tough time remembering really what was the big catalyst shift that moved me out of that depressive state and what that was. It may have been people starting to accept me or feel
Mhm.
liked, or was I pushing myself to fit into certain auras or images? But what ended up happening was I ended up stepping into my leadership role of who I was. And so I became an Eagle Scout. I became the vice president of my class and then the entire school my junior and senior year. I was on the varsity football team my last couple of years of school. I played tennis. I started to enjoy photography and a couple of arts and theater and lighting design and stage production and building stages for the various arts musicals or things that we had. I loved the building aspect of that. But I started to find more of a rhythm or more interest and then as a result find
Mm,
people that I gelled with in
mhm.
those circles to feel like I was, like, finding more cohesion, and so by the end of high school, things were great. I still wasn't, like, stellar in academics by any means, but I was getting by a
Mhm.
3.5 GPA, something like
Yeah,
that.
sounds
So,
good.
yeah, so that all worked well, and I grew a lot, and I made some really amazing friends throughout
Mhm,
high school, actually, I will
mhm,
say, and I've actually continued to stay in touch with them. When I was in New York, I lived there for 13 years. I got dinner with them on a monthly basis, continue to stay in touch. Even the people that lived across the water in Jersey City would hang out, Hoboken. And I'm still actually very involved with my high school today. I'm on my alumni executive development committee. I go back to the school to now talk to the high school seniors. I actually did that last week. And so I just want to give back because
yeah,
the school actually gave me a lot. And even
yeah,
in difficult times, I realize that. And I want to
yeah,
give back to a place that really developed me into a person from going through very difficult
yeah.
times to someone who was able to flourish and step into the next chapter of their life.
Yes, and I love that, but it seems as if just having access to those things right in front of you was something that may have helped you turn the corner when you were feeling suicidal. And it's so great that you had that. Like, I think there's a lot of kids who don't have those things right in front of them. So that when you get to that like moment where whether it's conscious or not, you have to make a decision. Am I going to move forward? And you had so many things you could get involved in. What about the kids who don't? What do you think? Do you have any advice for them?
Yeah. Talk to one person.
Yeah.
Find that one person that you are really able to connect with. A lot of times it isn't a parent that you're gonna be like,
Mhm.
"Oh, by the way, I wanna go kill myself. I'm feeling really depressed." Oftentimes, the parent's gonna be very like, "Oh my god." They might react too strongly, is what
Mhm.
it felt like for me, which is why I didn't wanna do that.
Right.
And what I'll say is if you have that one friend that you have a lot of support for, that you show up for. I remember back in the days when it was AOL and AIM, iChat on the computer, and so
Yeah.
we would AIM chat on AOL. Those are the people that you're able to really talk to and show up for. And you show up for them for a number of reasons. But those are the people that you can actually open up to and say something because they will
Yeah.
be there for you. And oftentimes they're your classmates and they're people that you actually trust. And even if it's
Yep.
that one person that you have, go talk to them, or even a school counselor who's probably a little bit more well versed in how to handle those situations, them.
Yeah.
But there are 100% outlets that you can find and online in terms of support. But what I'll say is, from my perspective, that's not the first thing that comes to the person's mind. The person isn't, I want to seek support. They're just like, oh, I'm extremely depressed. No one wants to hear from me.
Mhm.
I don't want to be a burden on other people. That's why I want to be out of here. I think the effort falls a little bit more on the institutions themselves in terms of allowing the student to feel like there is a safe space and allowing the students to feel like there's a level of awareness and acceptance of feeling these feelings. Not like these feelings are shameful and
Mm.
be thrown in the closet and not looked at, but how can we bring it into the light a little bit more to say, okay, yeah, people go through really hard times. It's not a reason to leave this world.
Yeah.
And how can we bring more of that conversation from the taboo and shameful and can't talk about that to, yeah, this is something that happens. How can we be aware about it
Mhm.
and then move forward together to allow people to grow in these spaces?
Yeah. It has to be more of an open conversation. It's a very sad thing, but it's so common. I
It
talk
is
to
very
so many
common.
people who say that they've gone through something like that, and always around the same time in that high school kind of or middle school time. Thank you for opening up about it. That's so helpful, I think, to so many people. And I'm really glad you got through it. And I'm guessing that when you got to the end of high school, you still had your aspirations to become an investment banker.
I
So,
did.
where did you go? You went to school, obviously.
I went off to college. I went to NYU, New York University in Manhattan, and that was a super pivotal point. So my first choice was actually Vanderbilt University. I wanted to go there with one of my best friends, and we both didn't get in. And then we were like, "Oh man!" And then so it came down to Wake Forest or NYU, two polar opposite schools. And Wake Forest very similar to Vanderbilt. And what ended up happening was I talked to my uncle, who was one of these very tenured MDs and had this amazing investment banking life. And he was like, look, like, I know you want the school spirit and the football teams and basketball and all that, but in New York, you have your professional teams that you're fans of. I was like,
Mm.
yeah, that's a fair point. And he's like, also, job opportunities coming out of NYU being in New York City in the region of New York as opposed to more south in North Carolina, you will have greater job opportunities for your desired role in banking. And I was
Mhm.
like, it's hard to argue against that.
Yeah.
And so I went to NYU. I majored in economics and minored in history, and I crushed it in college. In terms of academics, I don't know what came over me and what happened to me, but like the coursework, I just really dedicated myself, spent hours in the library, like just crushed it. I was interested in it. I wanted to do well.
Mm.
I did really well in school. And then I joined a fraternity my freshman because I was like, okay, well, if I don't get to be at a big school like Vandy or Wake, then I want more of that close community feel at a school like NYU where there's 30,000 kids. It's hard to really get that feel, especially in New York City where this campus is spread out. And so I joined a fraternity. I held a bunch of leadership positions, secretary, treasurer, president, new member educator. So really everything, became the president of the fraternity, found an awesome community. Lo and behold, they basically all worked in finance or consulting and stuff like that. So I found that community of people who also pushed me, and we helped each other with reviewing our resumes and mock interviewing each other and cover letters and things like that to help each other grow. But mind you, it was a social fraternity, but
Okay.
everyone worked in finance and wanted that kind of a lifestyle. So it was nice to be surrounded by those people who lifted one another up in that way. And college was awesome. Like, I had the time of my life at NYU. Being in a fraternity there was also really cool because we had a frat house at the top of an NYU dorm, which the university gives us. It was a two-story house that, like, slept 18 people, huge, beautiful views of New York
Oh my gosh, that
from
sounds great.
downtown looking uptown, and We got to have parties at bars and rent out like the sleekest clubs in Manhattan to throw parties and apartment parties at mixers. And like we had the best of all worlds in terms of a college experience. And so I was like, this is awesome. And I'm in New York. But you're also forced to grow up really quickly. Like, you don't really see people wearing sweatpants to class. People are like dressed up, like you're in New York, you're one of the New Yorkers. So it was a really cool experience and I had a great time. And yeah, that was a lot of my college days.
Oh my gosh, it sounds like a dream, actually. But what strikes me is how you went from someone who was depressed to a leader, not just being okay, but becoming a leader. So, what is it that made you a leader?
I'm gonna say it was my mom. Mom helped me step into my power as a leader. I don't know if she
Mhm.
saw something in me that I didn't see in myself. She pushed me tirelessly. She supported me. She was always there for me. She was just there, always there. No matter how tiring or onerous her life was, she was there for me and my sister. And throughout, whether it was helping me become an Eagle Scout or pushing me throughout I graduated high school with 2,000 hours of community service. I earned the
Wow.
Presidential Gold Award, the US Congressional Gold Medal for service, Princeton Chamber of Commerce Award for service, like my alumni community service award as a graduating senior. I was the president of a people to people international chapter, which did various coat drives for infants in Mongolia, Haiti earthquake victims, like shoes and soap for them. We did bike relay races in benefit of the seeing eye community. We hosted dinners for landmine removal in Sri Lanka. So like I was
Wow.
very into the community service oriented world. I consider service a big part of my life. And she really supported me and pushed me to achieve in these areas and take on leadership roles in service. And so from there, I was like, okay, like then I was vice president of my school and class. That was fun for me. I love talking to people and connecting with people and helping people. And so I think where the leadership really came from was, yes, I wanted to be a leader, but it was fun for me because I got to help serve others in those leadership positions.
Mhm.
That's something my mom really instilled in me.
Oh my gosh, your mom sounds like an amazing human being. And I know we're going to talk about her. So, then let's take it just through to the next few years. Went through college, amazing experience, graduated, and then you were in New York. So presumably you were able to transition right into the world of finance.
Yes. So I had a bunch of internships throughout college because these days every summer needs to be spent with an internship if you want to land one of those hyper competitive finance roles. So I had internships from Merrill Lynch to Lincoln Financial. I had jobs with GuidePoint Global and all of these other interesting companies. And I learned a bunch. So I applied to over 80 jobs and I had a bunch of interviews, but I ended up only getting a few job offers. And so I ended up working at a UK bank for my first job out of college. It was not even an investment bank, it was a commercial bank. So the difference between the 2 for those of you listening, commercial bank is more focused on larger corporations and being the go-to bank for these companies for their corporate finance needs, for their trade finance needs, to do some potential debt issuances here and there, cash management needs. Investment banking is very different. Investment banking is like you're the company's advisor, advising them on M&A deals, advising them on capital structure, and all of these much more, I'd call it sexy sort of things in the finance world. So my first job, I didn't even land a job in investment banking. It was corporate banking, but it was Lloyd's Bank, UK bank, and it was for a really cool program, which was you get to rotate across 3 teams and
Hmm.
experience all different aspects, both coverage teams and product teams at the bank. And so that was my first job out of school, and it was great. It's a huge bank in the UK. It's one of the largest
Mhm.
retail and commercial banks in the UK. But in the US, very small footprint. I would say like the office I worked in had probably 400-ish people. So pretty small environment. I worked on our tech media telecom coverage banking team, our trade finance team, and our financial institutions group team covering private equity funds. So I got to see a ton, and the people I work with were Great. But it wasn't investment banking. I was
Mhm.
aware of that. You're not earning an investment banking salary. It's very different in terms of what you earn in both worlds. But my lifestyle was pretty great. My lifestyle was I was working probably 8 a.m., 7:30, 8 a.m., 7:30 to 5 p.m. latest. I'd be out the door at 5. And that was great. I was like, okay, super like a late night there was like very rare. And it was great. I had a nice lifestyle, solid income, and I excelled incredibly well there. I was actually one of 600 people across the global bank. So it had probably 75 to 80,000 employees by the time I worked there in 2014 through 2015. They were celebrating the bank's 250th anniversary. So incredibly
Wow.
storied and historical bank. And I was selected as one of 600 people across the entire bank to attend their anniversary celebration in Birmingham, UK. So as a first year analyst in this program, they were like, "You're doing such a great job." And it would get to the point where I would like bring ideas to my bosses and talk to clients and do stellar work. So my people were like, wow, I've never seen someone do this stuff. And they recommended me. They were like, Neal should get a golden ticket to go to this event. And that's what it's called. I got a golden ticket. It was amazing. And I remember as I'm holding this massive golden ticket in the Birmingham, being like, I got this ticket. So I got to go rub shoulders with all the C suite and take part in this huge banquet celebration and like all of this cool stuff. So I'm super grateful for all of that. So that was a really awesome first job out of school.
And then at some point, though, you decided you wanted to move into a different phase. So where did you go next?
So I was there for a year and a half, and my pledge brother in my fraternity at NYU, he texted me out of the blue. He goes, "There's a seat open on the desk next to mine." So he works on the investment grade bridge syndicate desk. And so they basically had massive M&A deals. So for example, think about Amazon buying Whole Foods. That was like a deal he worked on. They would take these massive large company M&A deals and they would bridge the financing. So they would need billions of dollars to acquire it. We'll bridge you the money until you're able to go out to all the banks and get the commitments. And he was like, there's a job opening on the desk next to me called the leverage finance capital markets and syndicate desk. Are you interested? Because someone just left. And I was like, I have no idea what that jumble of words even means, but this is Goldman Sachs. And yes, I am so interested. I will send you my resume ASAP. Let's do this. And the process lasted probably about 2 months. I had 19 interviews and 3 super days. Super days are where you would go into the office for about 3 to 4 hours of 30-minute back to back interviews, back to back. There's no break. And I
Wow.
had 3 of those. I had 19 total interviews, including phone conversations with interviews. And then I got offered the job. And I was like, "Wow, this is awesome." I remember I would leave Lloyd's and be like, "I need to go to a doctor's appointment." Like, I would
Yeah.
just go and be gone for hours, and everyone would be like, "Is everything okay?" And so then I got the job, and I was elated. I remember getting the call. I was out with a friend, just grabbing drinks, catching up with someone, and I got the call, and I was like I walked out to take it, and I was so excited. I walked back, I was like, "I just got the job at Goldman Sachs. I'm so excited." So then I actually took a step back. So I worked at Lloyds Bank for a year and a half. This was in late 2015. And so they were like, "We'll offer you a position, but you need to start as a complete first year analyst again." So
Mm.
discounting all the work I had done for a year and a half. And I was like, you know what? I'm totally okay with that. This is where I'm going to cut my teeth and build my career.
Yeah.
Let's do it. Like, I have no
Yeah.
doubt I'll climb the ranks and crush it.
Yep.
And so I took a step back and then I joined Goldman at the end of 2015, which is where I sat on the leverage finance, capital markets, and syndicate desk. And I think that was one of the most awesome jobs. I think I had great jobs at Goldman. It was so fun. Like, I was in the flows of deals. And what I did there on the desk is leverage finance means you're dealing with highly levered companies. So companies below investment grade. So not your Walmarts or Apples or Boeings of the world, but you're dealing with these sub-investment grade, highly levered, which means they have a lot of debt relative to the cash flow they generate companies. And so we would basically work through how do we structure capital structures for these companies. Our job was to determine pricing. So where would these deals price? Because everyone wants to know how much interest am I going to pay if I have a billion, $2 billion, $5 billion loan out.
Mm.
I would run the bond math. And so I learned how to run bond math, and I would learn all of these incredible like comparative company analyses on number of metrics. And so it was super fast paced. Like I had my Bloomberg
Yeah.
screen up. I was talking to the traders all day, the salespeople. I was talking to our bankers. I was on the wall. So they have what's the concept of a Chinese wall, an information barrier
Mhm.
in banking, which is you have the private side and then you have the public side. I was on investment banking, but I was literally sitting on top of the wall. So
Okay.
I have all the private information, and I was the gatekeeper of that information as to when do we launch the deal. So that's why
Mm.
I would talk to our public side and be like, who's selling, what's happening in the secondary, like where are these bonds trading, everything like that. So I
Wow.
would keep my pulse on the secondary markets while simultaneously issuing in the primary market. And so my job was awesome, super fast paced. We would have drive-by bond deals where we would get in at 6 in the morning, launch the deal, get the like $1 billion of order books, price the deal all by 4 p.m. And the day was nonstop. The adrenaline would just like rush
Mhm.
through you, talking to investors all day. And so I would talk to these investors as well. So massive firms, BlackRock, PIMCO, T. Rowe.
Wow.
And so my
Yeah.
job was super awesome. I loved
Super
it.
high level, and I could feel the energy when you talk about it. It's like a rush when you're talking about it. But I know that it was probably a very intense job in terms of how many hours in a week you were working and your lifestyle. So just give us a little bit of what that was like.
Yeah, great. I was working in the earlier years, probably 80 to 100 hours a week,
Mm.
and the weekends included, going to the office on weekends. This was before COVID, so, like, in the office all the time. Even, like, VPs on my team would come into the office on the weekends, and so even, like, showing face, it'd be like, "Oh, they're in the office, I gotta be
Yeah.
in the office."
Yeah.
So, it was intense. It was like
It's intense.
it was a grind. I was there, I was working. I distinctly remember I was put on a project where I needed to go out, and one of the MDs asked me, managing directors asked me, "So, I need you to take this list of the top 50 loan and bond investors and find their relative assets under management for both of their strategies." And I was like, "How do I even go about doing this? Because a lot of the information isn't public." And he was like, "Your job as a Goldman Sachs analyst is to figure it out." And I was like,
Whoa.
"Okay, okay." So work was super intense.
But you were successful. You probably made a really good living financially, and you got a lot of exciting perks. I imagine that you met a lot of cool people. You went to a lot of great restaurants and went out, stuff like that.
You bet. But in the beginning years, I would say in the first analyst years, you don't really get that. You get that in the associate and VP years more. I luckily had great bosses, which actually did invite me to some of these meetings. You're on calls with them all the time because they have a very apprenticeship culture where you learn about how to do these deals by being on the calls with your bosses
Mhm,
and
mhm.
ESMDs. But yeah, towards the more associate years, awesome dinners like all over New York, these closing dinners all over the country. We would have really cool events that we would go to. Like I'll drive down the street even today and see the names of these companies that I've done deals for. Even companies as large as like Sprint, for example. We did like a massive $8 billion deal for Sprint, had a $40 billion order book. It's crazy. Like the kinds of stuff I was doing was really fun. Had a lot of exposure to very high level people. I remember
Yeah.
being on calls with Elon Musk for,
Woo!
yeah, we did Tesla's inaugural bond deal. And
Mm,
I remember just like listening on a call with Elon Musk talking, and you don't get that exposure every day. That's
no,
some really cool stuff.
no, it's totally cool, and your dreams as a child had come true.
I had manifested my life from childhood into my life. I didn't have
Yep,
my own banking firm, but I was high flying at what I
you were
believe to
living it.
be, yeah, but
You
what
were
I
living
believe
it.
to be one of the greatest sort of financial institutions
Yeah.
out there today.
Were you aware that you had manifested your dream?
No, I was not aware of it. So in it and living it that I
Mm,
was like, I didn't even take time to really pause and
mhm,
think that, oh,
mhm.
wait a second, this is actually what I've wanted my entire life, and it
Yeah.
is here. Didn't even
So,
think.
how long did you work there?
Yep. So that was the leverage finance desk, and then I actually got tapped to join our structured finance private placements desk. It was a two-person team, and my boss's boss actually left the firm, and then it was just her. And she was like, "I need someone." And then I was tapped by the head partner that ran the entire credit finance group to be like, "Hey,
Mm,
Neal, we need you to go in and take in a leadership role here." I was like, "Okay, I guess we'll do it." It's a very different experience and role. And I didn't have a sales force because this was purely private side. And so I was the structuring person, the salesperson, the company facing person, and the investor facing salesperson all in one.
Wow.
And we were a two-person team, and we skyrocketed that business. I moved over in April of 2020. We skyrocketed that business over 500% in 2 years to be
Crazy.
the number 1 structured finance private placement business on all of Wall Street. They do league tables as to where you rank. We were number 1. We had done billions of dollars of deals that had been unseen in the market. And as a two-person team, we absolutely crushed it. So my total time at Goldman was 6.5 years.
Wow. And you really were at the top at the end there.
Crushed it. Yeah, like
Absolutely.
absolute top, just like high flying.
It's amazing.
It was great. It was great.
That's amazing. And you were really on a high, but I know that there was a turning point.
There was a turning point.
Yeah. So let's move into that next part of your life.
Yeah, this is where it's crazy to think, but this turning point was in June of 2020 and just 2 days after my birthday, actually. So
Mhm.
my mom, who, as we've come to understand, has been an absolute light in my life, in
Well,
my
let me
family's life.
what was your mom's name?
Simi,
Simi.
Simi.
Okay.
So she was absolutely incredible. She really held the glue of our entire family together. Even our extended family is like your mom brought everyone together in and like Thanksgiving. Like we had Thanksgiving at our house, all these family gatherings. So in late June of 2020, let's rewind a little bit. We got a puppy and my mom was carrying in some groceries and tripped over the puppy gate, bringing in some groceries back in February of 2020 or something. And she partially sprained her finger, her thumb. And she, working at a hospital, she would be in these board meetings and the doctors would be like, "What's wrong with your thumb? What's happening?" She's, "Oh, like I just fell and hurt a little bit." And they're like, "Oh, that's a super simple procedure. You should totally get that done." And she's like, "Oh, I don't know. It's not like that bad. Do I need to get it done?" So fast forward, she's like, "Okay, let's just get this." They're like, "It's a super simple 30-minute outpatient procedure to get your partially torn ligament in your thumb fixed."
Okay.
So she was ultimately like, "Okay, like I might as well just get it done if it's that simple." And what happened was she went in for this outpatient thumb surgery. It's supposed to be 30 minutes, and my dad's waiting in the parking lot to drive her back home, and he's waiting, and ultimately, they can't arouse her after the surgery. She's intubated and rushed to the ER in Princeton on life support, and then she was there for a a few days, and then, like, they put her body through the cooling protocol, which is where you lower the body temperature in order to preserve and if anything had happened to the brain or anything like that, down to 90 degrees Fahrenheit, and then for 36 hours, and then slowly raise the body temperature back up. And then she was ultimately transferred to the neuro ICU at UPenn, where she received specialized neuro ICU care. She was having severe seizures. So, like, when I came home and saw her, I remember the day so vividly. It was a Monday. My sister called me. I was actually on a work call in my kitchen in my apartment, and then I sent her to voicemail. And then she texted me, she's like, "I need you to call me back right now." And I was like, "Whoa, what's going on?" She's like, "It's about mom." I was like, "Oh my God." Immediately just hang up the work call. I call my sister back. She's like, "They don't know what happened. Mom can't wake up, have a surgery. Like she's being rushed. She's in the ER. Me and my brother-in-law are coming back to Princeton. I need you to go get a COVID test because this is right in the middle of the COVID
Mhm.
pandemic. COVID test, get on the first train back, and like dad will pick you up from the train station or something." And I was like, "What?" I collapsed to the floor in my apartment. Like, I was there was this yoga mat lying out, just collapsed, like, head. I was like, "What is happening?" Started screaming. I was like, "There's no way, like, what?" And then so when I first saw her, she was, like, literally seizing, like, her body was completely seizing, and this was, like, hours after the incident, so it's just, like, crazy to be like, "Wow," like, you're seeing, like, seizure, like, someone completely seizing. And because it's COVID, like, there have all these protocols as to who can go in and see people, and they only allowed one family member to go in for 1 or 2 hours a day. And ultimately, we ended up getting an exception at UPenn where one person could go in but stay for, like, 6 hours or something like that. And it would mostly be my sister because she's a physician. She's trained at Harvard Medical School and all of that and really great. And so I would relieve her when things would get too emotionally taxing, and I would go in and spend time with my mom. And ultimately, she passed on about just shy of 3 weeks from the incident, and that changed everything for me. I was just like, "What is happening? Like, how could this possibly happen?" Like, she was right here. She wished me happy birthday a couple days ago, and now it's just like she's gone. It was crazy. Like, never did I think less than a month after my 28th birthday, I'd be writing a eulogy and carrying my mom's casket to the crematorium. Like, absolutely just wild. And then the first 6 months at the end of 2020 were really me picking up the pieces for my family. She was the breadwinner. She was the only one still working. My dad was retired. She kept everything running on track. So she managed the house's finances. Like, I needed to find dozens of login passwords, keep bills running on time, transfer payments, provide death certificates, transfer deeds, titles, mortgages, all like utilities. Like, she managed everything. So I basically had to go and figure out all this. And I was like, this is nuts, while going through my own grieving process, while going back to my investment banking role where we were having the most record year we've ever had. And so it was like crazy. I used work as a distraction as well and just like work really hard and do a bunch of work stuff and like distract myself. And then what happened actually is while she was in the hospital for those nearly 3 weeks, we would all sit down as a family and meditate together. And so this is where I think coming back into something I didn't mention in the beginning about my upbringing is really important. So I was raised on this spiritual path, self-realization fellowship by Yogananda, meditating since I was 5 years old. And I meditated as a kid growing up, but always out of obligation as to something my parents wanted me to do. It's like it was going to karate for me. I did
Mm.
not like karate, and so I just went to it because my parents were like, "Go to karate." My sister was a black belt, and I always went, but, like, I learned how to sit still and quiet my mind and not shuffle as much, and that was great as a kid growing up. But I never really was intentional about, let me go deep into meditation and see what's here for me. But with my mom's situation, we would sit down and meditate as a family and, like, send her healing energy. And in those days were some of the most, like, profound meditations I've ever experienced because I would visualize all of this. Like, I would see light going into a person and, like, through me and, like, seeing the entire situation. It was amazing. And then during that time, I would started to deepen my meditation at the end of 2020 and be way more intentional and about finding, like, how do I find peace through this and solace and
Mhm.
understanding? And my practice went from 5 minutes a day to 10 minutes a day to 10 minutes in the morning and then 5 minutes at night to 10 minutes in the morning, 10 minutes at night, 15 minutes both times, 20 minutes. And it would go deeper and deeper. And then when I went back to New York, this was at about October or so, 2020, a close friend of mine was like, "Oh, I work with this like amazing life coach. You should totally talk to them." I was still of this mindset of I overcame everything else in my life, my obesity, my academic struggles. Like, I went from a commercial bank to a place like Goldman Sachs. I remember back when I was working at Lloyd's and looking at places to go for investment banking, a recruiter specifically told me, he was like, you will never go from a tier 4 bank like Lloyd's to a place like Goldman Sachs. I didn't
Mhm.
even say Goldman Sachs. He was just like, he just said that. Mind you, I ended up there. And so I treated this thing as like, I don't need help from anyone else. I can do this. But then I had a call with this life coach. And so actually, before I even had the call with the life coach, I was like, what would I even work with a life coach on? And then what came down to me was my mom loved me more than I loved myself. And I was getting that love so much externally from outside of me that I didn't even need to cultivate that internally. And so I was like, okay, I think self love is what I would work on with this person because I don't have any of that. Like, my mom loved me more than I love myself. I don't love myself. Like, I'm still this, by all means, like, I have body dysmorphia or I had, and then I see myself as this same obese kid from middle school that no one wants to like and no one accepts. And so it's like, how do I cultivate that self-love? And so I had a discovery call with this life coach in the end of 2020, and then I started working with them through the beginning of 2021, and that was the turning point. That
Mm.
was a hugely transformative experience.
And then you made a major life decision.
So what happened is in the first 3 months of 2021, I was working incessantly every single day,
Yeah.
Saturday, Sunday, every day, because we just had a killer year and things were just nuts. And we were 2 people. We were 2 people working on this team and doing number 1 in the entire market with
Yeah.
the largest market share. It's like unheard of. All of these other banks have like teams of 6 to 18 people.
Mm,
And in the first 3 months of 2021, in my morning meditations, I continued to receive a calling or a voice saying, "You need to help people. You need to help people. You need to help people." I had never experienced something like that in my life. For 3 straight months, every day this happened, and I was like, "What is going on here? This is just too much." Like, this is something outside of me that I'm not
mhm.
thinking. It's like a thought coming into my head being like, this is it.
Yeah.
And then over the course of that time and that year, I started to recognize repeating number patterns. And this is where it really starts because I was like, as a financier, banker, economics major, surrounded by numbers my entire life. I invested in the stock market starting in
Mm,
college, like all of this stuff. And so I was like, okay. But then beyond that, the numbers would be like clocks, license plates, GPS things, dinner receipts, my Venmo balance, like everywhere incessantly.
mm.
And it was to the point where I couldn't ignore it anymore. I was like, why do I see these numbers that are just sequences everywhere? What's happening? I would then go through Google searches to sift through numerology, like was led to me. And I was like, oh, these are angel numbers, is what they're referred to. And I was like, okay, like how do I cultivate a language with these angel numbers? And I started to see what people meant by each number, what people had. And then I would also go into my own meditation and into it. I'd be like, okay, I'm seeing 222. What does this mean? What are you trying to communicate to me?
Was it always
And
the same numbers or different numbers?
literally all the numbers. It would be times where I'd be like 222, but there were days
Yeah.
and, like, weeks on end where it would be like 12, 12, 1, 1, 1, 2, 2, 2, 3, 3, 3, 4, 4, 4 every
Mhm.
single day, and I'd be like, "This is nuts. Never seen something like this."
This is like something was trying to communicate with you.
Something was trying to communicate
And
with me.
also, I think it's important to note that because of the intensity of your work schedule, I think I read that you began to wake up super early in the morning so that you could meditate.
Yeah. So I used to wake up at 4:30 in the morning because some of our days would start at 6 AM, and I would need to be at the desk by 6, 6:30, and I would wake up at 4:30 to start working out is what I did for most of my
Mm,
time at Goldman because in the beginning, you have no idea when your night is gonna end. No clue. It could be 8 PM, it could be 1 AM, and the only time I could work out would be in the morning, so that was the me time. I wasn't really having any focused meditation practice for
okay.
a while at Goldman because I was just
Okay.
like, "Oh, like, I need to focus on just working out and looking good." And when I started to go deeper in meditation in really end of 2020, beginning of 21, I was like, I need to fit in my workout and
Mhm.
meditation. My
Yeah.
meditation practice was now like 40 minutes. And so I would be like, okay, I need to wake up at 3:30 plus. And so I would actually wake up at 3:33 because it was an angel number. And I was like, oh, if they're communicating with me, I want to communicate back with them. And so
Yeah.
I just did that as like a cute little nod to be like, oh yeah, like I can communicate back. You like I see you.
Did you have any inclination that it was your mother trying to communicate through those numbers?
Not in the beginning. Yeah, that actually happened around Mother's Day in 2021 is when I started to be like, "Oh, wow, there's my mom's starting to communicate with me." It was around Mother's Day. And interestingly, so backtrack still in about April or even earlier, a good college friend had a father who passed on very suddenly as well, just a couple of years prior, and so she called just to check in on me, and we just talked about life for a while, and she was interestingly I had no idea what she did. She just called to be, like, a great friend, and I was like, "What do you do these days? What do you do?" She's, "Oh, like, I'm a business coach." "What does that mean? What do you do?" And she's like, "I basically help people, like, start businesses." I was like, "Cool." I had no inclination of starting a business. I had no desire. But we just started talking. She's like, "What gifts do you have to share with the world?" And I was like, "I don't know. People generally find me empathic and non-judgmental, and I have good advice and wisdom to offer people sometimes, and they really like that. And she was like, "Okay, what do you do with that?" And I was like, "I have no idea." And so I just went away for a couple of months. This was in the beginning of 2021, and just totally forgot about that. Went back to my job, just grinded it out. And then after a while, I was like, "Wait a second, like maybe I can do something with this." And then all of a sudden, coaching certification started popping up everywhere on my newsfeed. And then I took to Jay Shetty's, who I'd followed for a while, read his book. I love his energy and
Yeah,
his mission.
he's
And I
fantastic.
tore through his preliminary free course. I was like, "Oh my God, this is actually just fun. Like maybe I just want to do this for fun." And then I tore through his minimum 120-hour coursework and went above and beyond in terms of the live coaching hours and self-study. And I was like, "This is just, like, fun for me. This is
Mhm.
enjoyable." And then I worked with my friend to help me build my business. And then I launched it immediately to friends and family and immediately had clients coming, paid clients. And I was like, "Whoa, that's how this works?" And then at the end of our coaching programs throughout the end of 2021, people would be like, "You changed my life. That was really profound and transformative. I can't thank you enough. You've completely changed my entire perspective." I was like, "Whoa." Did not know I had the power to do that, or that's amazing. And then I was like, "Okay, maybe this is something I can do, like, full time as, like, a
Mhm.
job." And as 2021 went on, I started to then communicate with my angels, and
Mhm.
things started to get more intense. And beyond the numbers, I started to be like, "Okay, I'm getting the numbers." I created a language with the numbers, and I think it's important to anyone listening to this that sees the angel numbers. Yes, they have specific energies associated with them, and Pythagoras, who's the ancient Greek philosopher, 600 BC, and polymath who created the Pythagorean theorem, even says that every number has a specific energy tied to it. And repeated in sequences or in patterns, they amplify their energy. And while that's true, and there are different energies associated with them, I urge everyone to create their own language through the numbers, just like
Mhm.
there are different sorts of slang or inflections or tones in our own way of verbally talking through words. Numbers have the same thing. They mean different things to different people, although they can have overarching themes. So I started to create a language and cultivate that language. And then I would ask for specific signs. I would go for runs and see other angel signs, feathers, like dozens of feathers just like on my running path, like throughout the entire 3-mile run. Be like, okay, that's wild. Rainbows, butterflies, different songs that came on shuffle out of
Yeah.
nowhere that seemed to have a message for me or something I was thinking about or an answer for me.
Yeah.
Billboards, storefront windows, and the
Yeah.
storefront windows is actually when I started to realize my mom was communicating too. And I saw a Mother's Day sign. I forget exactly what it said, but it was like something like, "Your mother's always been there for you," or something like that, and I was like, "Oh my god." And I was, like, thinking about her, and I just turned my head. It was in Herald Square, New York. I remember I was just, like, walking down the sidewalk. I was just, like, thinking about her. I was like, "Wow, everything's so beautiful. So grateful I'm noticing these signs." And then I turned, I'm like, "Oh my gosh." I was like, "That's a." I felt it. I was like, "That's a sign from my mom." And then I started to ask for specific signs, and I would be like, "Okay, I wanna see someone wearing this on the subway platform." And I would see that. And then I would say, I want to like have a specific, like, how do I feel more confident? Or what am I supposed to do in this situation? And everything would start to completely unfold. And books were guided to me out of nowhere,
Mhm.
or podcasts, or different things were just like somehow showed up, or different people showed up in my life out of nowhere. And I was like, okay, there's something greater happening around me that I can't
Yeah.
ignore anymore. And then I started to go deeper in it as my own coaching practice took off and meditation went deeper. And then I started to communicate with these angels. I was like, can I talk to them? Like physically talk to them out loud? Can I receive messages from them? And I would start to do this. And I practiced for months and I started to receive these messages from my angels. And I started to go through these guided meditations to connect to them and then connect to my mom. And I was like, "Can I connect to my mom? Can I talk to her?" And then I would start to have these incredibly profound, like, visions and experiences and felt senses and like words being guided to me. I'm like, wow, okay, like that things have drastically unfolded from anything I thought life could be. And for a while, I was also called to work with ayahuasca, which it was never really something I was like, "Oh, let me go do ayahuasca." There was like a calling being like, "You need to go to the Peruvian Amazon to work with plant medicine." And that was so deep because my intention was to heal a lot of grief that I had suppressed in me through that.
Mhm.
There was just such a profound release, just like tears and sobbing and just like really feeling that grief lift off of me. That really lifted a lot of energy from me. And I can't thank Mother Ayahuasca. It's only a feminine plant medicine that's associated with the mother. That is, yeah, that's the energy of ayahuasca. It's Mother Ayahuasca.
Oh.
And it's such a beautiful experience in Peru in the
Yeah.
Amazon.
Wow, and I've heard some people have very negative experiences with ayahuasca as well, but for you, it was a good positive experience.
Yeah, I think it's a mix of the facilitation, who you do it with, how
Okay.
you do it, the intention,
Yeah.
and how you prepare as well.
Yeah.
Because I followed a very specific diet for they recommend 2 weeks, but I did a month, and it's you really can't eat anything with tyramines or specific things that may interfere with the MAOIs in ayahuasca.
Okay. Oh, that's interesting. Wow.
Yeah.
So, you at some point then made the decision to make this your full-time profession?
Yes. So the ayahuasca experience is about the end of 2021, and then as my coaching practice continued to ramp up, I was guided to learn energy healing. And then I was like, okay, let me see what is here for me. Like, I feel confident in, okay, I saved up my bonus. Like, I'm a vice president at Goldman Sachs. Like, I built this business over the course of the last year. Let's go off and try this now. Let's do this. Let's step into something. Maybe there's something here for me. And then I made the decision. I left Goldman in the first quarter of 2022 to do this full time. And it's very interesting because it's like I didn't go to a competitor. I remember specifically the head partner who tapped me to join this two-person team on the private placement test. She was like, "You have a clear path to becoming a managing director here." She was like, "You can take over this business. Your boss will go take over another business. You can be an MD here. Just, are you sure you want to leave?" I was like, "My soul is calling me to do something completely different. I'm being asked to be in service to others, and this is lights me up and is fulfilling unlike anything I've ever experienced." I did it in a measured way where I was like, "Okay, I saved my bonus. I can sustain my lifestyle for a number of years, even if I earn nothing," in a very myopic case. And I was like, "Okay, like, what's holding me back? Is it this idea of society told me I need to be this banker that makes all this money and does this lifestyle and grinds myself?" And
Or were
I
you
realized
holding on to a childhood dream?
it was a mix of both, but I think there was also a lot of fear. I'm
Yeah.
someone who wants stability. I had this incredibly stable job earning a lot of money, hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. And I was like, this is a steady, dependable income stream. I get to live an awesome life. I don't really need to budget my money or worry about where my money goes. And I craved stability. So stability is a big part. It's a very Taurus moon aspect of me. And so I I wanted that. But then I was like, well, I have this stability in terms of my bonuses here. I can be okay. But this is like fulfilling my soul and I love this. And then energy work and plant medicine. And then I started to learn breath work and everything. And I was like, and I was like, meditation is the key. Like meditation has changed
Yeah.
my life. If there's one thing, it's meditation. So
I know, absolutely. I feel the same way about meditation. I have not gone as deeply into it as I would like to. You inspire me to want to do that a lot more. How did you manage to trust that it would be okay to let go of the job at Goldman Sachs? Like for someone who wants to make a change like that or feels called to something bigger, how did you trust and detach?
there was a level of just meditation twice a day, just feeling so aligned. The word is alignment is and it got to the point where it didn't feel as scary anymore. It was just
Mm,
like it's the way I think about it is like it's a wave. And the wave was just carrying me. Instead of me
mhm.
in terms of like my old job or like my old life being like, oh, like I'm dragging this cinder block being my job and my success story. And I need to drag it all the way to the top and drag it with me up this corporate ladder. And this is my dream and I'm carrying it with me. There was none of that. I was the one being dragged by this wave. This wave was a
You were like
mission of purpose.
floating. Yeah.
Yeah. It was
But it
just like
feels like that's happened throughout your life. You've had these like times where you've run into, I don't know, roads or trouble of some sort. And then naturally You allow yourself to flow and pick up, and it ends up that you rise. Always you rise. So that's really an interesting pattern for your whole life. I'm so interested in everything that you're doing now. So I do have some questions now to shift into more of the spiritual side for you to talk
Yeah.
about some of these really cool things. So first of all, I want to know, what's the definition of an angel?
Yeah. Great question. An angel is also, I consider to be a spirit guide. It is a high vibrational being. And much like there are different sorts of spectrums of light that we can see in our visible spectrum of light, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, violet, there's a ton of different forms of energy that we can't see. And that's X rays, gamma rays, different forms of radio waves. We can't
Wi-Fi,
see them.
right?
Wi-Fi. Yeah, no, totally. We can't see them, but they're there. And similarly, there are these other high vibrational beings of love and light energy, which I consider to we can't see them necessarily if we're not attuned to that. It's like being a radio antenna. If you're not tuned to a certain station, you can't hear it. You can't necessarily see them. Some people can see them, and they're there. They know you better than anyone knows you. They have traveled lifetimes with you. They have your best interest in mind, and just as interested in them as we are, they are as interested in you. And they can never harm people. They can only act for the highest good of all and the benevolence of all. So you can't ask them to not do this or I don't want to get sick. You can't ask that. You have to ask that free from physical illness and fully vital. You can't ask them to harm other people. They won't do that. They only act for the highest good, but they can also only act when called upon because they never want to impose or encroach upon your free will. So you need to consciously call them in and they are always there. And there's no ask that's too big or too small, or there's no over asking of them. They are always there. Their sole purpose is to be with you to help you through this life.
Are all spirit guides angels and vice versa?
I don't believe they are. I don't believe all spirit guides are angels.
Okay.
You can have actually other vibrational beings. So I know some people like believe in fairies and some people believe in other types of different sorts of energies that have archetypes for them.
Mm.
That is all true and real. They do exist. I have on the deepest layers of spirituality and on the deepest layers of consciousness, the angel is actually you. We are at these different densities of light and different densities of energy. They are just vibrating at such a fast frequency and higher density of light. But ultimately, that angel is you, is your higher self. Because there is, in my belief, singularity of source consciousness that is infinitely fractalized. And it
Mhm.
gets fractalized into universes and galaxies and solar systems and even further down. But one of those fractalizations is the angelic realm or angels, and it gets fractalized even further. And when that happens, you exist. Then there's
Mhm.
you. But at the highest levels, your higher self is your angel. A lot of people don't necessarily get that, but
Mhm.
that's how I've understood it and how I've felt it. But I also still talk to them as if they are outside of me and a little
Mhm.
bit are a guide and someone that's here with me to be like, hey, have this conversation. And yeah, we're different, but you're also me and you're guiding me. And you can see everything from a higher plane, so to speak, a higher purview where you can
Mhm.
see the entire outcomes and you can guide me on my highest timeline or highest path. So that's how I view it.
Okay. And so how do you ask for what you want? What's the process?
Sure. There's a couple of ways. The one way is just to have a conversation, which I just do sometimes with
Do you
my
do it out loud or are you doing it in meditation?
I do it a mix of out loud. I'll speak out loud, and I do it alone because I'm like, I don't want other people to be like, "You're crazy." But I can do it out loud. I do it also in my mind, and then I receive, like, instantaneous responses, like, pushed into my head that are not from my own consciousness, but, like, outside of me.
How do you know the difference? If you're asking for something and you're getting answers, how do you know the difference between your own thought or something that's coming from elsewhere?
There's a couple of ways. One is when you think a thought, you typically can, like, feel it. It originates, like, in the head. It's, like, in your head. You can
Mm,
feel, like, "Oh, the thought is, like, coming in my head." Like, when I think, the thought feels it's, like, in the center of my head, like, coming from my brain. When
Yeah.
I communicate with these beings on the other side, either my mom or other people's loved ones who have crossed over, which has interestingly started happening in angel readings, it will come to me as a presence or a felt sense. So the angel communication, it just comes into my head before I even finish asking the question. The
Okay.
answer will come sometimes, most of the time, actually. And it's like the answer's already being given before I ask the question. The best way I can describe it is that it's pushed into your head from outside of you.
Yeah. And you're
And
kind of steering like from the side when you talk about that. Whereas when you talk about the ideas, you're gesturing on the top. That's
yeah,
interesting to me, like the location. You told us one way of asking. Was there something else you were going to say about that?
yes.
I mean,
So
interrupt.
my favorite way of asking is called the most benevolent outcome.
Mm,
I literally start my entire day with requesting a most benevolent outcome for how I want my entire day to go, and even specific life situations, client meetings, travel, life experiences. And the way you ask for it is angels and energetic beings of love and light. I request a most benevolent outcome for, and then you fill in the blank of what it is that you want. So, for example, one that I loved is for my physical health. I would say, angels and energetic beings of love and light, I request a most benevolent outcome to go about my day in complete full health and physical vitality and vibrancy, where my body stays safe and healthy. I have a great workout where my body is fully vibrant in its power, and I'm able to magnetize my dream body towards me in a safe and healthy manner. So may it be, thank you. And so things like that are ways that you can request most benevolent outcomes. You can request them for business meetings. I request a most benevolent outcome for having a amazing meeting with this client that flows with ease and grace, that we share incredible ideas, we have incredible rapport, and the decision that's made is for the highest good of all. Again, they can
yeah.
only act for the highest good of all. And so I love asking for the highest good of all because it's not just my highest good, but it's also the other person's, and knowing that
Yeah.
whatever decision comes from there, like, it takes away any stress or anxiety to be like, "Oh, this didn't happen. Oh my god, like, I'm so pissed off." No, okay, how do I also start to trust that, like, what is meant for me won't go past me? How do I start to trust that I'm in the exact place I'm supposed to be? How do I trust that if this didn't work out, maybe it wasn't supposed to work out in this moment, or maybe this
Right.
wasn't the right client to match my energy, and this was just a learning experience along the way. So it
Absolutely.
takes away all the stress or anxiety of being like, my life needs to turn out this way. And it
Yep.
helps you enter into flow even more.
Yeah, I love that. It's like when you get stuck in traffic, I always think it's protecting me because if I had been further ahead in this traffic, something may have happened that might not have been for my highest good. And I also want to point out that when you ask for this most benevolent outcome, you're phrasing it in the positive. You're not asking for what you don't want. So that's really important.
That is so crucial. It is so crucial to say what it is that you do want, because that is also one of the key tools for manifesting as well. How do we shift our perspective? Oftentimes we think about, oh, I don't want this, I don't want this. Okay, it's great to know what we don't want because that helps us know what we do want, but oftentimes we get hung up on the things that we don't want. How can we shift to come back into a perspective of, okay, how do I call in what it is that I do want by focusing my energy on that?
Yeah, I love that. And you talked in the book too about say something called lofty questions. So instead of saying an affirmation like I am abundant, I am a money magnet or whatever those affirmations are, you rephrase it in the form of a lofty question, which kind of I feel like that's going along with what you're saying with the most benevolent outcome. It's like a good pairing to talk about that next because you can hone in specifically on these positive aspects rather than just doing a generalized kind of affirmation. So can you talk about that a little bit? The lofty
Oh,
questions.
100%. I'm so glad you brought that up because I am obviously, as a former banker, very analytical, left brain logical. So I love science as to what is the science behind spirituality, but
Mm,
also using my right brain in terms of the creative, intuitive, spiritual side. And lofty questions I got from Christy Marie Sheldon. She's a really awesome teacher who talks about this, but it is a form of affirmation that you use instead of the I am affirmation that allows you to activate your brain's reticular activating system. And so your RAS is right in the back of your head. It's where your brain connects to your brain stem. And ultimately, how it works is what we tell our brain to focus on, it will consciously go out and select the answers as to why that is true. A couple of great examples is the famous punch buggy game, the VW punch buggy game, driving down the highway. We would punch a friend and say, punch buggy, no punchbacks. And we couldn't punch back our friend until we saw another VW buggy down the highway. What does that do? That automatically tells the brain, the reticular activating system, I want you to focus on finding a VW buggy so I can punch my friend back. And as out of all the cars going down the highway, we try to specifically, our brain will more specifically focus on those VW buggies. Similarly, if you go into, let's say, a business meeting, a business lunch, and before you walk into the meeting, say, I'm so grateful that we had such an amazing appetizer. We had a fantastic conversation with the client. We ended up really having a great dessert and making awesome plans to meet with the client again and potentially gain some business. Well, when you get a fly in your main dish or a hair in your main dish, that's not going to trigger you as much as to into falling back into a negative thought spiral or seeing things from an ungrateful, angry, disappointed lens. What you're going to actually tell your brain to focus on before walking into that business lunch is having a great appetizer, having great conversation, having great dessert, and meeting again with the client. And then that thing won't take as much of a head or emotional space because you're not focusing on it. You're focusing on the other things around it. And then you are consciously setting the intention to bring those things into being through the power of expectation, but then also releasing the expectation or attachment to that outcome.
Yep.
Sorry, back into the lofty questions.
Yeah.
How it works is you ask yourself an action oriented question. So instead of the I am affirmation, you ask, why am I so strong and physically healthy? And instead of focusing on, oh, you don't go to the gym 7 days a week and work out for 2 hours, and you had that one chocolate last night, what you're gonna do is what I do is I ask the question, and then I answer it for myself. Because what it does is it's
Mm.
already training you to show you that you already are that. You already are strong and healthy. Like, how can you remember that and then simultaneously make more of those decisions and actions to pull that energy into your life instead of I am strong and healthy. And then the ego going, you're not strong and healthy. You had a chocolate last night. And then that completely self defeating the purpose of the affirmation. So I think lofty questions are really beautiful because it allows you to be action oriented and already believe that you resonate at that frequency.
Yeah. I found that so useful because it also just it gets you focused in on the specifics and like you said, it makes it translate into action because for me that's where the manifestation comes in. It's thinking through but also then getting to the change, like the catalyst to change. There's got to be that place where it comes to be. Oh,
Yes,
super
completely.
interesting. Oh my gosh. All right. I want to talk a little bit more about the angels spiritual part of this. How can you communicate with your mom? Like for people who aren't understanding how that takes place, just walk us through that a little.
Yeah. So it's been a really interesting evolution on how that's happened. And in the beginning, it would be in meditation. And I would go into a meditation with the core intention of talking to my mom, communicating with her, feeling her presence, feeling her love, feeling her guidance. And I would go into this space where I would completely quiet the mind, still the heart, and bring in this intention, this presence. And I would feel her presence come to me. It would approach me, her presence would come into me. I would it's the presence that arises as opposed to necessarily, like, the full person, but the way she does show herself is through her features, the mom that I know her to be,
Mm.
and so she would approach me, and then she sends me, like, different sentient feelings to feel, and she will flash me back to different life experiences that I've had in terms of things, like, she wants me to remember or things that she wants me to feel, and then what would happen is I would ask questions, like a dialogue. I would ask specific questions and she would give me specific answers. And they would be answers again that came from outside of me. I didn't feel like I was making them up. And I would be like, wow, okay. And it would be like a full blown dialogue. And again, it was like before I would finish the question, the answer would come. And sometimes there were times when I would look in a mirror and completely out of nowhere, her presence would just come in, and I would be like, "Whoa," and I'd start sobbing and, like,
Mhm.
completely feel her presence and, like, have her start, like, communicating to me, and she's, "I'm so proud of you," and get hugging me, and I was like, "Wow." Just completely out of nowhere, I would just be looking in the mirror one night, and this would happen. I feel her presence through communicating with her and even through other people in other instances, like, people will say things to me through them that will be her presence coming through the person,
Yeah.
and it has gone to show me, as I talk about in my book, that everything is energy. Just because a person is gone in the physical material world, their presence and energy is not
Right.
gone. The
Only their
soul
body is gone.
exactly.
It's yeah, it's not even gone, it's just changing. Body
Correct.
is changing. I love that. I feel that, and I think we had a moment where I felt your mother's presence come through me
Yeah.
when we were talking. And it's funny, I didn't tell you this yet, but I after we had that conversation when that happened, she was still here and she was talking to me and she said, "Thank you."
Wow.
And
Wow.
I felt like I really felt she was there. And I understand that. Do you think everyone can do this with their loved ones?
Yes. 100%. 100%. It actually really kicked off for me in 2022. I took a trip to Egypt, Jordan, and Israel. It was a trip I planned with my mom before COVID happened, and we were supposed to take together with my sister and brother-in-law. She passed on, my sister and brother-in-law had a kid, and I quit my job, and I was like, "You know what? I'm taking this trip as an honor to my mom." And right before the trip, less than a week, someone I randomly met, again, synchronicity, gave me the book Signs by Laura Lynn Jackson. And that book talks about how to cultivate signs with loved ones on the other side.
Mm,
And the rose is a really prominent sign I share with my mom. Both she loved a rose drink growing up that is from India, and we would always share this sign of a rose. And I was like, okay, well, I want the rose to be a sign from my mom. I get to Egypt and I start receiving all these rose things that coming up. And then I land in this one city called Aswan, where I take a Nile cruise up the Nile. But before that, I get into a car and the side of the car says Red Rose Travel. We go to an Egyptian essence, like place where they make essence and press essence, which is just the pure flower that they press and ferment. And the first thing the guy talks to me about is this beautiful Egyptian rose essence that we spent. This essence bottle has 40,000 rose petals pressed into it. And I was like, oh my God, my mom. And so I got some of that essence to be like, okay, mom, I get you. Like, yeah, I'm bringing this rose home with you. And I brought some for my dad and sister. And then I get onto this Nile cruise and I start talking to the pastry chef right as I get on. And he's, oh, look what I made this morning. It's a bouquet of chocolate roses. And I was like, oh my gosh, I can't. And the roses
yeah,
are everywhere. And
yeah,
I think everyone can communicate with their loved ones on the other side. I think it takes consciousness to be like, okay, I want to do this. I want to communicate with them.
yeah. I believe that 100%. I communicate with my mom who's passed, and one of the main signs that I use as communication or she uses is coins. And
Wow.
I know that's a frequent for other people too, but when you wanna tune into it, it's there.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful. Do you happen to say to motherless children, I think there's a little bit of an invisible thread that connects us, motherless children, regardless of how old you are when your mother passes. There's something about it. I don't know. What do you think about that?
As I've gone further down my journey in consciousness and spirituality, I see everything as everything. And everything is in some way reflected back in everything else. And it's even gotten to the point where I now see like son as father, the earth and being here as mother. And if I even think about being on this earth, it's like I'm in the mother's womb in a sense. Like the earth is surrounded by an ozone layer, which feels like it's like a placenta or something. And me by being here on this earth is being one with the mother.
Yeah.
And so I've started to be just communing with everyday life situations as seeing that beauty in everything and seeing my mom as a reflection of divine mother and being like, yeah, she was just a symbol and reflection of the overarching divine mother, the overarching mother that is always there with me. She's gone nowhere. She
Yeah.
is everywhere. She is
Mhm.
everything. And so I think that's what I would say. It's yes, our moms are amazing. We couldn't do anything without them. They are our symbols, they are our strength, and allowing ourselves to see that strength in everyday life situations, we can continue to carry forth their presence in everything that we do, knowing that they have not gone anywhere, that they are always with us.
Yeah, I believe that. And I think that ties in a little bit too to your when you talk about the self, because I think that the self and the inner life is part of that oneness and that connection. And so I always think of it as my mother is me and I am her as well. And then it makes me think about how you say in your book, self awareness is the key to growth. But then you also talk about this collective and the oneness of everything. And so I love that the self and focus on the self isn't selfish in a bad way. It actually connects you to the greater, wider world, to the greater good, to the collective consciousness. So, could you, I don't know, put that in layman's terms somehow?
Yeah, yeah. So there's two interesting aspects. There's once you're able to generate the level of self awareness and self love from within you, then you start to see everyone else as a reflection of you, as a reflection of someone who is there to love you and help you and grow with you and support you and be there in your life for a reason, season, or lifetime. And once you're able to internalize that full self-awareness and full self-love, then it transcends to love that is just all around you because loving the other is loving the self. And then it expands even further. You're like, "Oh, okay. Self-love, I got that." But then it's like, loving you is actually loving me because we are all one. And so then
Yeah.
you extend that level of self-love once you've fully embodied it and learned it to say, "Okay, I am now supposed to be here as an extension of love, an extension of forgiveness to you because I see your soul." Right? We think about people say namaste in Indian culture. I see
Mhm.
soul sees the soul in you. It's a reflection. It is all connected. I love the concept of thinking about a spotlight that is out there in this universe and shining a light onto the earth. And this spotlight is broken up into tiny little mini sections, and each little beam of light is a singular human here. And we are all from this same spotlight. We are all made of this same light energy. And that's why when we treat the other like we would treat the self, the golden rule, do unto others as you want done unto you, you're actually helping yourself as well. And so you are extending your love. And that's why there's this concept of all is one. And once you come into full self realization, you then realize that by extending that love to others, you are actually loving, forgiving, doing all those things for yourself as well.
Yeah, that sums it up. I love that. Is there anything in your life that you would rewrite?
What a question. I feel like I've heard this question asked on so many different shows and different things. And I feel like I'm going to be a broken record when I say the
Ah,
same response that I
I know
always.
what you're gonna say.
I was thinking about this the other day. Actually, just this morning, it was my sister. I'm at my sister's house, and she has all of these pictures of my mom all over, and it's really beautiful. And I was actually just doing like some foam rolling and just like stretching this morning, and she has this beautiful series of pictures of my mom at her wedding. And I was looking at these pictures, and I was like, "Mom, like, if you didn't depart from this plane, I would still be working as a banker at Goldman, and I wouldn't be about to be going on this amazing journey of exploration and expansion." So I'm going to Portugal to learn plant medicine ceremony therapy, and then Ibiza to connect to this beautiful community I met last September in Morocco. And I was like, "Mom, if you were still here, I wouldn't have been like awakened to all of these other parts of life, all of these other deep spiritual truths, deep knowings, deep perspectives that I just never even saw a perspective like that before." And I would say no. I would say there's nothing I would necessarily rewrite because I think it's all played a purpose in my life so far.
Yeah.
Did I wish I maybe wasn't so obese? Yeah. Maybe there's part of me that was like, yeah, maybe you should have eaten healthier as a kid. But even then, that played its purpose because it showed me that taking care of my body every day through some form of daily movement is extremely important. And so that's ingrained an active lifestyle or working out as part of my daily health practice in my life. And maybe that wouldn't have happened if I wasn't obese. So all of
Yeah.
it has a purpose.
Yeah. Is there anything that you want to be free from in your mind or in your life right now?
Material attachments and desires. That's number one, and expectations of outcomes and judgments of others. I talk about this in my book, and I call them the big four. And those are the big four that I believe through my spiritual study keeps us engrossed in our view that the physical world and physical reality is all that is. But when we release those big four, material attachments, material desires, expectations of outcomes, and judgments of others on a superficial level, the superficial judgments, then we can step into a space of deeper soul awareness. How can I
Mhm.
see this person as their soul self as opposed to just this physical human body that's in front of me?
Yeah.
And then you can also transcend the need to be tied to all of these physical things in this world while doing our duty to do these things and know that, yeah, I can earn these things and have these amazing and cool experiences and luxury vacays or whatever that is, but doing it in a non attached way to the physical
Yeah.
materiality of it.
Because if you release the fear that you won't have it, that's when you get it.
100%. 100%.
It's so mind blowing. It's so hard to release that. It's so hard to release that. But the lofty questions that you talked about, the most benevolent outcome that you talked about, those are some really actionable tools I think people can use. And also, I think another really good actionable tool, which is cliche, but it really works, is the journaling. And I love how you say that it has to be done in your own hand, not digitally. I believe that as well. And I always use a pencil when I'm writing. I don't know, few quick tips about journaling, but and then I want to ask you and we'll be into roll into the lessons.
Yeah. So the thing about journaling is it creates separation from the thought because the
Yeah.
thought is intangible. The thought your brain can run around and say, "Okay, I solved this thought process," or "I came to a conclusion here and it's all solved."
Mhm,
But you're
mhm.
not consciously taking that in because the conscious mind processes 2,000 bits of information a second, and the subconscious mind processes, I think, something like 400 million bits of information a second. It's moving fast. We're not necessarily taking that in. And either speaking it out loud or my preference is writing it down creates separation from the thought and it creates a level of somatic connection to what you're writing. So it's connecting the mind, the body by writing, and the spirit by what's coming out of it in a beautiful connective manner. And so writing is it's a beautiful way to, I believe, in my view, let the soul speak. You're letting your soul
Yeah.
speak through the writing and you're
Yeah.
connecting all of these parts of you that
Yeah.
create the separation and allow you to have greater clarity by seeing it on paper to say, okay, now I'm actually processing things. And then you start to go deeper and be like, okay, you start to realize things that you wouldn't have realized just by thinking things around.
Absolutely. And there's the old saying is that you don't have to believe everything you think. Your thoughts are not always true. And so you get to weed out the thoughts that maybe aren't serving you with that process as well. I love that. Oh my gosh. We could just talk for hours, but let's start to come to closure and to talk about what you think are the biggest lessons that you've got from your life or overall lessons you think for others.
Yeah, beautiful. The biggest lessons I think I've received from my life are allow yourself to open to new perspectives. It's all about the perspective you choose to look at a situation to. Gratitude in the present moment is everything in terms of something we believe is good or believe is bad. That is only our perception of it. The faster we can allow ourselves to realize that everything happening around us is actually happening for our highest good and evolution and growth, the faster we are able to raise our energetic vibration and come into a space of gratitude, which then allows us to move forward in beautiful ways. Only love is real.
Mm,
Only two things exist, and that is love and a call for love. Asking myself the question, is this a love based decision or thought, or is this a fear based decision or thought? And knowing that fear is part of the egoic separation of self from the eternal, changeless spirit of oneness that you are so much more powerful than you think you are. And it all comes down to self belief that whether you believe it or not, you're right. And that's all that matters. That our core purpose here is to create and to love, that we are all one, and that slowing down allows us to see the symbolism of everything in this world and that everything here is a symbol. It's a symbol of helping us grow in some way or helping us interact with the world in some way so that we can make sense of it and that we can do our best while we're here. And slowing down allows us to recognize the synchronicities that are happening all around us and the magic that is swirling all around us and the miracles that are unfolding in every single moment. And that the present moment is the only moment there is. The past is just a memory of that moment. Similarly, the future is a concept of a moment that doesn't exist. And the present moment is actually the only moment that does exist.
Yeah.
Those are just a few of my tidbits that
Oh,
I've learned. I'm
wow.
sure I could keep going on, but those
Well,
are
that's enough to keep us busy, I think, in our journals for quite a while. Oh my gosh. And what about your blessings? What are the biggest blessings of your life? Things you're most grateful for?
the biggest blessings of my life are my mother, my family, my friends, and the people I have encountered along my life path. The people are really the biggest blessings because it's so beautiful. The kinds of people I'm able to meet, I'm blessed to meet. I pause because part of me pauses in saying this word, but I think the next phase of me is stepping out to embrace this word and reframe this word because I was very much in resistance to using it up until March 2021, actually, is when vividly remember this changing. The blessings of God is the word I want to say.
Yeah.
And what I view God to be is the energy of divine love. I don't believe that God is a man or person sitting in a chair deciding if you go to heaven or hell. I think God is genuinely the energy of unconditional divine love. That's what it is. It's just a concept that we've put a word on. And the blessings of God or that unconditional divine love are the blessings that I give gratitude for every moment in my day, for everything I have, because without that love energy, knowing that everything is unfolding for my highest good, because I am only loved and only love is real, that is the biggest blessing ever, period.
Yeah. And so your old belief that your mom loved you more than you love yourself, has that changed?
Yeah, that's definitely changed. That's changed. I see self love and I see more than anything, the essence of divine love, which is literally the aspect that has created everything in my life. And that love literally surrounds me if I truly believe that, right? And so seeing that essence of divine love all around me, that means I'm loved beyond measure from without and within.
And I don't even have to ask this, but what's the most important thing?
Love.
You are love. You are pure love. If people get to see your eyes, they are a window to love. They're
Thank you
beautiful.
so
They're
much.
beautiful.
Thank you.
So, yeah, thank you. Thank you for spending this time with me. Thank you for being so open. Thank you for all of the amazing things that you have taught me and everyone listening, and that you continue to teach, and the things that I'll have to think about and people will have to think about that will impact our lives in just amazing, beautiful, positive ways. So, thank you.
Thank you so much. The feeling is so mutual, and I'm grateful to be here. And thank you for having me on your show and sharing this story with all of your listeners. And I hope everyone takes away an interesting golden nugget of information that they can carry forward that will help their own growth and evolution. So thank you.
Yes. And if you want more, banking on angels.